The message from my father glowed on my phone screen with its usual commanding tone. Family meeting at the manor, 7 p.m. Non-negotiable. I stood before the imposing oak doors of my family's historic mansion, my hand hovering over the antique brass knocker. The carefully preserved Victorian architecture and my father's prized collection of vintage cars in the circular driveway represented everything the Reed family stood for: tradition, wealth, and the preservation of the past. Everything I'd apparently failed to honor. I am Autumn, the black sheep of the Reed family. While my siblings collected prestigious degrees and accolades like vintage wines, I chose a different path, one that involved breathing new life into forgotten treasures with my own hands, building something uniquely mine. My father's antique empire dealt in perfection. I saw beauty in the broken. The door swung open before I could knock. "You're late," my mother said, her pearls gleaming in the evening light, lips pressed into a disapproving line. "Everyone's waiting." I glanced at my watch, 6:58 p.m. In the Reed family, anything less than 15 minutes early was considered an insult. The study fell silent as I entered. Victoria sat primly on the edge of a Louis XIV chair, her M&A lawyer's briefcase by her feet. Penelope, fresh from her private clinic, wore her designer surgical scrubs like armor. Blake, my younger brother, didn't even look up from his tablet, probably checking his tech company's latest stock prices. My father stood by the floor-to-ceiling display cases housing his most precious antiques, hands clasped behind his back like a museum curator preparing to dismiss a forgery. "Sit down, Autumn," he commanded, gesturing to the lone Victorian chair facing everyone else. The setup reminded me of an auction house, with me as the item up for assessment. "What's this about?" I asked, remaining standing, my eyes drawn to the half-restored Tiffany lamp in the corner, one I'd begged to repair months ago. Victoria reached into her leather briefcase and pulled out a document, the paper so crisp it practically crackled in the silence. "We've been discussing the family's legacy," she said in her boardroom voice, "and we've come to a necessary decision. For the preservation of the Reed name," my mother added, perching beside Penelope on the antique settee, her fingers nervously adjusting her heritage diamond necklace. The document made its way into my hands, the legal jargon dense but certain phrases cutting through like sharp edges of broken glass: formal dissolution of familial ties, relinquishment of inheritance rights, termination of family trust association. "You're disowning me?" The words echoed against the wood-paneled walls, bouncing off display cases filled with pristine antiques my father had collected over decades. "It's not personal." Blake finally looked up from his tablet, his tech executive polish unable to hide his discomfort. "It's about preserving value." "Value?" I laughed, the sound harsh against the refined atmosphere. "I'm your daughter, your sister. How is this not personal?" "Your choices reflect poorly on the Reed legacy," my father said, gesturing to the surrounding antiquities. "Your little restoration hobby, my business," I corrected, my voice steady despite the trembling in my chest. The irony wasn't lost on me. Surrounded by these preserved pieces of history, they were about to break apart their own family. "Fixing broken chairs in your warehouse isn't a business," Penelope scoffed, her surgeon's hands elegant even in dismissal. "It's embarrassing. Do you know what my colleagues at the clinic say when they ask what my sister does?" "We've given you every opportunity," my mother continued, her voice echoing off the crystal displays. "The finest schools, connections to the most prestigious auction houses, access to the best collections, and you've thrown it all away to play with damaged goods." I looked down at the document again, my hand steady despite the earthquake in my chest. Years of subtle jabs about my peculiar interest in restoration, disappointed sighs when I'd choose a broken antique over a pristine one, and backhanded compliments about my creative hobby had prepared me for this moment. They'd never understood that sometimes the most valuable things were the ones that needed fixing. Where do I sign? My mother blinked, her carefully preserved facade cracking slightly. Autumn, if you'd just reconsider your approach to preservation, where do I sign? Victoria pointed to the bottom of the page with her Mont Blanc pen. Initial here and sign here. The family attorney is waiting in the library. 10 minutes later, it was done. I was no longer officially part of the Reed family. The weight of their expectations, their obsession with perfection, their dismissal of anything broken or flawed, all of it lifted from my shoulders. I hope you understand, my father said as I headed for the door, his reflection multiplied in the glass cases of his precious collection. This is for the preservation of our legacy. I turned back one last time, taking in their faces, the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. You know what's ironic? You're so worried about preserving the family name, about maintaining perfect appearances, but you have no idea what I've actually built. You never bothered to look past the surface. Autumn, my mother started. No, I cut her off, my hand on the doorknob. You've made your choice. Now you get to live with it. Just like all these perfect pieces you've collected, beautiful on the surface, but ultimately empty inside. The door closed behind me with a soft click, too gentle for the magnitude of what had just happened. My phone buzzed, a notification from my restoration studio's business account. Another commission had come in, this time from a prestigious museum, pushing my monthly revenue well into six figures again. I smiled as I walked to my restored vintage Mustang, thinking about the stack of antiques waiting for my touch, the upcoming collaboration with the Smithsonian, and the feature article being written about my innovative approach to historical preservation. They wanted to cut me off? Fine. They'd learn soon enough what they'd thrown away. Success, after all, is the sweetest form of restoration. As I drove away from the mansion I'd grown up in, I didn't feel sadness or anger. Instead, I felt something else entirely: freedom. The freedom to see beauty in imperfection, to believe that everything broken deserved a chance at renewal. Family, I realized, wasn't about preserving appearances, it was about who sees the value in what others discard. And I had people in my life who did exactly that. They just weren't the ones I was leaving behind. You did what? Maya nearly dropped her artisanal coffee across my workbench. 3 days had passed since the disownment, and I'd finally gathered the courage to tell my best friend. Signed the papers without arguing, I said, carefully applying gold leaf to a crack in a Victorian music box, following the Japanese kintsugi principle of highlighting repairs rather than hiding them. You should have seen their faces. They expected tears, begging, maybe a dramatic breakdown worthy of their family theatrics. But your inheritance, Autumn. The Reed family collection, the connections to every major auction house in the country, all of it just gone? I set down my restoration tools and looked at her directly. What inheritance? A share in a business that only values perfection? The privilege of being told my restoration work ruins antiques at every family dinner? Marcus burst through the door of my workshop, his laptop clutched to his chest like a priceless artifact. My marketing director and business partner always had perfect timing. Autumn, you need to see this. He spun his laptop around. Heritage and Restoration Monthly just featured us. They're calling you the revolutionary restorer, bringing new life to America's forgotten treasures. Maya leaned in to scan the screen. Holy! Autumn, these commission rates, is that really how much museums are paying you? That's just last month, Marcus grinned. Wait until they see our new conservation technique. The Sustainable Restoration Initiative alone is going to, my phone buzzed, another commission request, then another, and another. What's happening? I asked, setting down the delicate gold leaf brush. Marcus refreshed his browser. The article just went live. We're trending in the art world. The historical preservation community is going crazy over your innovative restoration methods. I walked to the wall of display cases showing my latest restorations. Antique furniture brought back to life, vintage timepieces ticking once again, damaged art pieces transformed into stunning examples of preservation meets innovation. Each piece told a story of resurrection, of beauty found in brokenness. We need to scale up, Marcus said, already typing furiously. I'm getting inquiries from 3 major museums. They want exclusive restoration contracts. Maya squeezed my shoulder. And your family has no idea. They never bothered to look, I said, picking up a piece I'd finished that morning, a Victorian music box restored with gold-filled cracks, celebrating rather than hiding its history of damage. Too busy protecting their perfect collection to notice their daughter built a 6-figure restoration business from scratch. 7 figures, actually, Marcus corrected, still typing. After these museum contracts go through. My phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Is this Autumn Reed? A woman's crisp voice asked. This is Catherine Williams from Antiques and Heritage Quarterly. We're doing a feature on innovators revolutionizing historical preservation. Your name keeps coming up in conservation circles. I caught Marcus's eye. He gave me a thumbs up. I'd love to hear more, I said, keeping my voice steady despite my racing heart. We're particularly interested in your philosophy of highlighting rather than hiding repairs, your innovative conservation techniques, and your rapid rise in the field. Would you be open to an interview? Cover story potential? I thought about my father's face when he saw me on the cover of the magazine he'd subscribed to for 30 years. Absolutely. When were you thinking? After setting up the interview, I turned to find both Maya and Marcus staring at me. What? Antiques and Heritage Quarterly? Marcus whispered. Do you know how huge this is? Their features literally define careers in the preservation world. Maya hugged me tight. This is it, Autumn. This is your moment to show them what true preservation means. I pulled away and picked up my tools again. No. This is my moment to show that sometimes the most valuable restorations aren't about maintaining perfection, they're about honoring the journey of broken things. I gestured to my workbench, where dozens of damaged pieces waited for my touch. I've got restorations to complete. The next few weeks passed in a blur. I hired 3 apprentices to help with the growing workload. Marcus expanded our online presence and negotiated deals with museums. Maya helped me prepare for the magazine interview, asking questions about my restoration philosophy while I worked on increasingly complex pieces. Tell me again about your inspiration, Maya said one evening, playing reporter while I delicately reconstructed a damaged Faberge egg. I held up the piece, its newly restored surface catching the light. I see stories in broken things, in the pieces others discard. Every crack, every imperfection tells a history. It's not about erasing that history, but about honoring it while giving it new life. That's it, she said softly. That's what makes your work special. You're not just restoring objects, you're preserving their stories of survival. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. The Metropolitan Museum wants to meet tomorrow. Their entire Victorian collection. Be ready. I looked around my workshop, once an abandoned warehouse, now a thriving restoration studio. Damaged treasures lined the walls, half-restored pieces waited on workbenches, the air rich with the scent of wood polish and possibility. You know what the best part is? I said to Maya, who was admiring the Faberge egg's restored surface. I'm doing exactly what I've always wanted to do. What they called a hobby is now revolutionizing how we think about preservation. Speaking of them, Maya hesitated. Have you heard anything? Not a word. I picked up my tools again. But they will soon enough. Everyone will. The restored Faberge egg caught the setting sun, its repaired cracks now filled with gold, creating an entirely new pattern of beauty. Like my life, I thought, what was broken becoming something unexpectedly magnificent. Time to get back to work, I said, reaching for another piece waiting to be restored. These treasures won't resurrect themselves. There she is. Catherine from Antiques and Heritage Quarterly rushed toward me, her heels clicking against my studio's restored hardwood floors. Our cover star. She thrust the magazine into my hands. My face stared back at me, surrounded by my most intricate restorations. The headline read, "The Art of Resurrection: How Autumn Reed is Revolutionizing Historical Preservation." The response has been extraordinary. Catherine gushed. The conservation community is buzzing. 3 major networks want features on your restoration techniques. Marcus burst in, waving his tablet. Autumn, the website crashed from traffic. We've got waitlists forming for every restoration service. And that Metropolitan Museum contract, they doubled their initial offer. I traced my finger over the magazine cover, still struggling to believe it was real. The article detailed everything: my restoration philosophy, conservation techniques, revenue growth, everything except my family's rejection of my work. The Today Show called, Catherine continued. They want to feature your restoration of the Vanderbilt clock. Prime morning slot. My phone lit up with a text from Victoria, my first contact with family in 2 months. Family business requires urgent discussion. Critical matters pending. I showed the message to Maya, who'd been quietly cataloging restoration requests. Funny how you're suddenly family again when they need something, she muttered. Another text arrived, this time from Penelope, saw the magazine. Your restoration work, why didn't you tell us? Call me ASAP. Ignore them, Marcus said, glancing at my phone. We've got bigger things to focus on. The British Museum wants to commission 3 full collection restorations, 6 figures each. Catherine cleared her throat. Speaking of figures, Forbes is interested in featuring you in their 30 under 30 list for innovation in arts and culture. The notifications kept coming. Blake, Mom's upset about the press coverage. You should call. Then my father, we need to discuss your recent publicity and its impact on the family business. Your restoration philosophy is inspiring people, Catherine said, oblivious to my family drama. Young conservator refuses traditional methods, proves everyone wrong through innovation. It's resonating, especially your approach to highlighting rather than hiding imperfections. Marcus added, the video of you restoring that damaged Chippendale chair went viral. People love seeing the transformation process, how you honor the piece's history while giving it new life. My phone buzzed again, my mother this time, family dinner Sunday, 7 p.m. Your father's study. We have much to discuss about the future of Reed Antiques. Maya read the message over my shoulder. You're not going, right? I picked up a piece of fractured Victorian porcelain, turning it over in my hands. Remember what you said about my work, Maya? About preserving stories of survival? Autumn, no. They don't deserve, I'm going. I cut her off, but not for the reasons they think. The rest of the week was a whirlwind. The Today Show interview went viral. Restoration commissions flooded in faster than we could handle them. I hired 5 more apprentices and leased additional studio space. Look at these numbers, Marcus said during our Friday meeting. We've exceeded our annual projection in just 2 months. The museum conservation community can't get enough of your work. The waiting list for private collection restorations is 6 months long. Even with our premium restoration rates, one of my apprentices added. I nodded, only half listening. Sunday's dinner loomed in my mind. Then my phone lit up with an email that changed everything. Holy! I whispered. Marcus looked up. What? The Louvre, they want me to lead the restoration of their 18th century furniture collection. The studio erupted in cheers. Maya hugged me tight. See? This is what happens when you believe in the beauty of imperfection. When do they want to meet? Marcus asked, already pulling up his calendar. Next week. In Paris. I laughed. They're sending their private jet. Sunday arrived too quickly. As I pulled up to the family mansion, I noticed all their cars were there: Victoria's sleek Mercedes, Penelope's BMW, Blake's Tesla. The whole Reed family, punctual as ever. My phone buzzed one last time, a message from Catherine. Breaking news. Your Antiques and Heritage featured just one historical preservation story of the year. Congratulations. I smiled, tucking the phone away. Perfect timing. The door opened before I could knock. My mother stood there, looking exactly as she had the night they disowned me, except now her eyes held something new: desperation. Autumn, darling. She stepped forward for a hug, her vintage Cartier bracelet catching the evening light. I didn't return it. We've missed you. Behind her, I could see the rest of the family in my father's study: Victoria with her briefcase again, Penelope pretending to examine a display case, Blake actually looking at me this time, my father still by his beloved antique collection, but his stance less commanding than before. Have you? I asked, stepping past her into the study, my boots clicking against the hardwood floors my father had imported from a French chateau? Or did you miss what I represent now? The room fell silent. On the mahogany desk, I spotted copies of Antiques and Heritage Quarterly. My face stared up at all of us, surrounded by pieces I'd brought back from the brink of destruction, a testament to everything they'd dismissed. We should talk, my father said, his voice lacking its usual authoritative tone. About the future, about the Reed legacy. I sat in the same queen and chair they'd put me in months ago when they decided I wasn't good enough to be part of their perfectly preserved world. Yes, I agreed, smoothing my vintage Chanel dress, a damaged piece I'd restored myself. Let's talk about legacies. The silence in the study was thick enough to cut. My mother busied herself adjusting priceless figurines nobody asked her to touch, while my father kept glancing at his wall of certificates from prestigious auction houses. Your restoration work is remarkable, Victoria finally said, tapping the magazine cover. The profit margins mentioned in the article are quite impressive. Remarkable? I raised an eyebrow. I thought it was just a hobby, playing with broken things. Wasn't that what you called it? Penelope shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her fingers tracing the edge of a nearby display case. We may have been hasty in our assessment of your methods. Hasty? I took in the room, my eyes lingering on each perfectly preserved piece. You disowned me, had it notarized, because I dared to see beauty in imperfection. About that, my father stepped forward, his reflection multiplied in the glass cases surrounding us. We've been discussing, as a family, and we believe it's time to rectify that unfortunate situation. Unfortunate situation? I repeated, my eyes drawn to a flawless Empire period clock that had never missed a second. Is that what we're calling it now? Victoria reached for her briefcase, ever the lawyer. I've drawn up papers to nullify the previous agreement. We can have it done today. The timing seems convenient, I said, watching their faces, right after the magazine cover, the TV appearances, the Louvre announcement. The Louvre? Blake perked up, his tech executive polish cracking. They're working with you? They're flying me to Paris next week, I said casually, enjoying their shocked expressions. Private jet. Something about revolutionizing their restoration department. My mother dropped a priceless porcelain figurine. It shattered on the hardwood floor, but nobody moved to clean it up. The sound of breaking porcelain hung in the air like an accusation. Autumn, my father's voice took on the tone he used for major auction acquisitions. There's something else we need to discuss. The antique business is struggling. I finished for him. I know. The market's shifting. Younger collectors want pieces with character, with visible history. They're not interested in perfectly preserved emptiness anymore. Your restoration-free approach is becoming obsolete. The color drained from his face. How did you? I have good advisors now. They keep me informed about market transformations and emerging opportunities. Then you understand, Victoria jumped in, her legal training showing. The family business needs to evolve. Your innovative restoration approach, your media presence, your connection with younger collectors, it could be exactly what Reed Antiques needs. I laughed, the sound echoing off the display cases. So that's what this is about. You don't want me back, you want my success to save your outdated business model. That's not fair. Penelope protested. We're family. Are we? I stood up, walking to the wall where family portraits hung chronologically, none of them including me, because 3 months ago, in this very room, you made it very clear that I wasn't preserved enough to be a Reed. People make mistakes, my mother said softly, still staring at the broken figurine at her feet. We're trying to make it right. No, I turned to face them. You're trying to save yourselves. The business is facing bankruptcy, isn't it, Dad? And Victoria, that partnership at the auction house? It fell through when collectors started demanding restoration services. Penelope's private practice is struggling, and Blake's tech investments tanked. They stared at me, shocked at how much I knew. Like I said, good advisors. We could help each other, my father insisted. Pool our resources. The Reed name still means something in this industry. My name means something, I corrected him. My work means something. And I did that without your perfectionist legacy. Actually, I did it by embracing everything you taught me to reject. My phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. Louvre doubled their offer. Says your restoration philosophy is exactly what they need. I have a meeting, I said, gathering my things, with people who saw value in my work before the magazine covers and TV spots. Autumn, please. My mother grabbed my arm, her vintage tennis bracelet catching the light. We're sorry. We were wrong. What more can we say? I gently removed her hand. You know what's fascinating about my work? I take pieces that people have given up on, things considered beyond repair, and I show the world their inherent value. But some things, I glanced around at the perfectly preserved room, once broken, need to stay broken. Some relationships, once shattered, are more honest in their broken state. You're really going to hold on to this? Blake asked, after we've apologized. Apologized? I walked to the door, passing the broken figurine, a perfect metaphor for our family. All I've heard are business propositions and convenient excuses. Not one of you has actually said you're proud of what I've built or admitted you were wrong about my vision. You just want what I have now. That's not true. Victoria started. Save it, I cut her off. Keep your legal papers and your business proposals. I'm doing fine honoring imperfection on my own. At the door, I turned back one last time. You know what the worst part is? If you'd supported me from the beginning, I would have helped you without hesitation. Family meant everything to me. But you taught me something valuable when you disowned me. Sometimes the family you choose is better than the family you're born into. And mine understands that perfection isn't the same as value. I walked out, leaving them with their broken figurine and shattered pride. My phone buzzed again. Maya this time. How'd it go? Exactly as expected, I texted back. They want what I have, not who I am. Their loss, she replied. Studios packed with new arrivals from that estate sale. Want to come help? Pizza's on me. I smiled, starting my car. Family dinners are overrated anyway. Especially when they're served with a side of hypocrisy. The sun was setting as I drove away, casting long shadows behind me. Like the pieces I worked with, I'd been discarded but found my own way to shine. Some might call it poetic justice, I called it restoration of the self. The text came 3 days later, dinner tonight, please. Dad. I showed it to Marcus during our morning restoration assessment. Think he'll actually understand the value of imperfection in person? Don't go, he said, not looking up from his laptop. We've got the Louvre meeting tomorrow, and the British Museum contracts need reviewing. I'm going. I picked up a damaged Art Nouveau vase, considering its potential. But this time, I choose the place. I texted back, Lantiquaire, 8 p.m. I'll make reservations. The response was immediate, that's rather expensive. I'm buying, I replied. Bring Mom. Let me show you what actual value looks like. Lantiquaire was the kind of restaurant my parents used to boast about frequenting before their business started struggling. Each table was decorated with authentically restored antique centerpieces, most of them my work. I arrived early, wearing a vintage Dior dress I'd restored from near destruction to museum quality. They walked in right on time, looking uncomfortable among the beautifully imperfect surroundings. The maitre d' recognized me immediately. Miss Reed, your usual table is ready. Chef Michel sends his regards and asks if you'd like the special tasting menu he's prepared in honor of your Louvre commission. My parents' eyes widened. I smiled. That would be lovely, Thomas. Thank you. Once seated, my father cleared his throat. Your usual table? I invest in businesses that understand true value, I said, sipping my water. This place included. Chef Michel does amazing things with traditional recipes that others would discard as outdated. My mother fidgeted with her napkin. Autumn, about Sunday, let's order first. I cut her off as the sommelier approached. The 82 Bordeaux, please. The whole bottle. My father's face paled. I knew he recognized the four-figure wine when he used to collect before his business started failing. Now, I said, after our glasses were filled, what's so urgent? They exchanged glances before my father spoke. The bank called in our loans. All of them. We have 30 days to either modernize the business or sell Reed Antiques entirely. And, my mother jumped in, we've explored every option. Nobody's lending in this market, not to traditional antique dealers, especially not to those without restoration services. Which is where I come in, I added, watching the wine swirl in my glass like the twists of fate that had brought us here. The first course arrived, each dish served on restored antique plates that I recognized I'd done the work myself. My parents barely touched their food, the irony of eating from restored pieces seemingly lost on them. We need help, my father said finally, the words seeming to physically pain him. Your help. Financial help, I clarified, not family reconciliation. Both, my mother insisted, her hand trembling as she reached for her wine glass. We were wrong, Autumn, so wrong. Seeing what you've built, your vision for preservation, my vision? I set down my fork. I'm exactly who I was 3 months ago. The only difference is now I have validation and influence in the very industry you claimed I was destroying. The second course arrived on a spectacular restored Art Nouveau platter. My father still hadn't touched his first course. "We're not just asking for money," he said. "We want to merge the businesses. Your restoration philosophy, your innovative approach, it could revolutionize Reed Antiques. Modern preservation techniques, sustainable restoration practices, and save the family legacy." I finished his thought. That's what this is really about, isn't it? Legacy? My mother reached for my hand across the antique table. I let her take it, watching her face. "We're losing everything, Autumn. The shop, the collection, our reputation." Like I lost my family, I withdrew my hand. The main course arrived, perfectly presented on restored Victorian silverware. The chef stopped by personally to check on us. "Everything is exquisite, Michel," I assured him. "The restoration work on these serving pieces sets off your presentation beautifully." After he left, my father leaned forward. "How much?" "Excuse me?" "To save Reed Antiques, how much do you want?" I laughed, the sound drawing glances from nearby tables. "You still don't get it. This isn't about money. It never was. It's about understanding that value isn't measured by perfection." "Then what do you want?" he demanded, frustration breaking through his carefully maintained facade. "I wanted you to love me for who I am," I said quietly. "I wanted you to be proud of me before the magazine covers and TV spots. I wanted a family who saw value in my vision without a profit margin attached to it." The dessert arrived, an artistic creation served on a restored Belle Époque dessert service, its repaired cracks highlighted in gold. My mother started crying silently. "We can change," she whispered. "We can learn to see things differently." I signaled for the check. "Maybe you can. But here's the thing, I don't need you to anymore. I don't need your approval, your connections, or your name. I built something beautiful by believing in exactly what you rejected." The bill came. I handed over my black card without looking at the total. "So that's it?" my father asked. "You'll let Reed Antiques die? Let us lose everything we've preserved?" I stood up, smoothing my restored vintage dress. "You taught me an important lesson when you disowned me. In business, as in restoration, you have to know which pieces are worth saving. It's not personal." "Autumn, please," my mother started. "I have an early flight to Paris tomorrow," I cut her off. "The Louvre's sending a car at 6. Their entire 18th century collection awaits. Enjoy the rest of your dinner. It's already paid for." I walked out of l'Antiquaire, leaving them with their untouched food and the weight of their choices. My phone buzzed. Maya, asking how it went. "They finally learned about value," I texted back. "Too bad they still don't understand worth." The night air was cool on my face as I headed home. Tomorrow I'd be discussing restoration philosophy with the world's premier museum. Tonight, I'd left my parents with a bill they never saw coming, the true cost of valuing perfection over authenticity. They offered what? Maya nearly fell off her chair in my Paris hotel suite. "Full acquisition of Reed Antiques?" I repeated, still staring at the contract my father's lawyers had emailed, offering to sell me the entire family business. "They want me to preserve the Reed legacy," their words, not mine. "Holy," Marcus whispered, pacing the room. "That's not including the Louvre contract or the British Museum Commission." My phone buzzed. "Victoria again, Dad's meeting with bankruptcy lawyers tomorrow. Please consider our offer." I ignored it, focusing on the Paris skyline outside my window. The Louvre's private car would arrive in an hour for the final contract signing. "Your family's blowing up my phone too," Maya said. Your sister Penelope came by the studio yesterday. What did she want? To explain their side. Said they're about to lose the family collection. Blake's moving back in with them since his tech investments failed. Another text from my mother, please come home. We need to discuss the future of Reed Antiques. As a family. Marcus stopped pacing. You know what's ironic? If they hadn't disowned you, your restoration business wouldn't have grown this fast. You channeled all that rejection into revolutionizing the entire field. Speaking of work, Maya picked up a piece from my latest collection, a phoenix rising from shattered crystal and broken porcelain. This is different. More personal. It's for the Louvre installation, I said. I'm calling it Family Legacy. My phone rang. Dad. I let it go to voicemail. You could save them, Marcus said quietly. Acquiring Reed Antiques would give you everything they never wanted you to have. I could, I agreed, but should I? Maya stood up, walking to the phoenix sculpture. Remember what you told me when you started this? About seeing worth in damaged things? Maybe this isn't so different. She turned the piece, watching light play through the restored crystal. Sometimes the most meaningful restorations aren't about erasing damage, but about incorporating it into something new. My phone buzzed again, a text from Blake. They're selling Dad's first acquisition tomorrow, the Georgian writing desk. They made their choice, I said, but my voice wavered. That writing desk was where I'd first learned to appreciate antiques, sitting on my father's lap as he explained its history. Marcus sat down, pulling up something on his laptop. Look at this. I've been analyzing the numbers. You could acquire Reed Antiques for a fraction of its former value right now. Transform it into a modern restoration house. Your innovative techniques plus their traditional client base, it could work. Maya added, but only if you want to. Some things are worth restoring, others. A knock at the door interrupted us. A courier with a thick envelope. Inside was a letter from my father, handwritten on his personal stationery paper from that Georgian desk. Autumn, I've written this letter 100 times in my head. Nothing sounds right. Nothing can excuse what we did. You were always the visionary among us, seeing beauty where we saw only flaws. We were too blind, too obsessed with perfection to see it. I'm not asking for money or a business merger. I'm asking for a chance to be the father I should have been, to understand the value you've always seen. We're losing everything, but that's not why I'm writing. We lost what mattered most the day we signed those papers. We lost you. I'm proud of you, not because of your success, but because you never lost your vision, even when we tried to break it. Love, Dad. The paper trembled in my hands. Autumn, Maya asked softly. He said he's proud of me, I whispered, for the first time in my life. Marcus closed his laptop. The Louvre contract doesn't need to be signed today. We could postpone. My phone buzzed one final time, a text from Penelope, Mom's in the hospital. Anxiety attack. She keeps asking for you, talking about that writing desk where you used to sit together. I looked at the phoenix sculpture, its broken pieces forming something new, something stronger than its original form. Call the car, I said. We're making a stop before the Louvre. Where? Maya asked, though her smile suggested she already knew. The bank. I need to make some arrangements. And then? Marcus was already dialing. I picked up the phoenix, carefully wrapping it. Then we're going to restore a family. But on my terms. What are you thinking? Maya asked. A new vision for Reed Antiques. Modern restoration techniques, apprenticeship programs, a complete reinvention of how we value historical pieces. We'll teach people that every crack tells a story worth preserving. With you in charge? Marcus added. With me as creative director, I agreed. Dad can stay on as chairman emeritus, he knows the history, I know the future. They want to be family again? Fine. But we do it my way. No more hiding imperfections, no more shame about different approaches. No more perfect facades hiding empty histories. The prodigal daughter returns, Maya smiled, but this time, she's rewriting the rules of preservation. I looked at my father's letter again. Sometimes the pieces we break can be restored into something stronger. But first, everyone has to acknowledge the value of the breaks. The car arrived as I finished packing the Phoenix. It seemed fitting that this piece about transformation would now witness one. Ready? Maya asked. I nodded, tucking the letter into my vintage clutch. Time to show them what true restoration means, and what it costs. We headed down to the waiting car, the Phoenix carefully cradled in my arms. Its restored crystal caught the morning light, sending fragments of color dancing across the hotel walls, broken pieces coming together to create something unexpected, something even more valuable than the original, just as it should be. The newly renovated Reed and Daughter Restoration House gleamed under the autumn sunlight. My latest installation, a massive chandelier made from restored period pieces, dominated the entrance. Each piece told its own story of damage and renewal, highlighted rather than hidden. I watched from my office, formerly my father's study, as he guided a young collector through our newest exhibition, The Beauty of Imperfection. His voice carried the same passion it always had, but now he spoke of history preserved through restoration, not despite it. Maya appeared at my door. The Smithsonian curator is here for the demonstration. Tell them I'll be right there, I smiled, watching my mother arrange a display of recently restored pieces, each imperfection now a badge of honor rather than a mark of shame. Sometimes, I thought, the most valuable restorations aren't about returning something to its original state, but about creating something better from the broken pieces. My family had learned that lesson. And so had I. The Phoenix sculpture sat on my desk, a constant reminder that sometimes we have to break something completely to build it back stronger. Its golden repairs caught the light, throwing patterns across the walls of what was once my father's sanctuary of perfection, now transformed into a celebration of beautiful imperfection. Just like us.